Hi everyone, welcome to Scottish Summit 2021 and to my talk, The Things We Don't Talk About, here with Mike Hartley. Before I begin, I would like to give a massive shout out and a big thank you to all of our wonderful sponsors. I know it sounds corny, but seriously, without them this event would not be taking place. So big shout out to Scriptrunner, to DQ Global, to Proximo 3, to Red Spire, Agilisys and to Hitachi Solutions. Thank you all so very much for making this event possible, especially in these times. So, who am I? My name's Mike Hartley. I work at Enhance as a Dynamics 365 consultant, and I'm also known as Heart of the Midlands, which is a personal brand. And you can find me at heart365.co.uk and at heart365 on Twitter. Please connect with me. You can also find me on LinkedIn, etc. as well. So I may pop the details up in session details later. But feel free to connect with me. I'd love to hear from you and to chat with you. So, the things we don't talk about. Well, a long while ago, and it was a long while ago, I came up with the idea of starting a podcast. And it sprung out of the fact that I am very open about my own personal mental health. And whenever I'm open about it, or I tweet about it, or I blog about it, I will get messages, or I will get people coming up to me, sort of sidling up to me, a little bit, just sort of creeping up to me, and they'll say things like, "That's me, but it's really brave of you to come out and say it." And I just sit there and I think, well, it's not brave of me. But then I think, well, for some people it is. They can't think about their mental health. They can't talk about their mental health, certainly not openly, and certainly not on a globally public platform like Twitter. And I thought, why is it that we can't talk about these things? And it's all to do with stigma. And that got me thinking about all the other things that we just do not talk about. And I decided to start a podcast and invited my good friend Alison Mulligan to co-host with me and to be a partner in the podcast. And we thought about all the topics, thought about the name, and came up with the things we don't talk about. Alison's idea for the name, by the way. And it kind of gestated because, like many people, last year took its toll on me. I had some seriously low points. And the podcast itself sat. We did some recordings, but I could never find the energy to edit the recordings. And when it came to actually pushing the publish button, it became really difficult for me and really challenging for me, because I thought, can I honestly put this stuff out there? And I did. And so that's the podcast. You can find us on all major podcast channels. I would strongly recommend watching the videos on YouTube, because we have some awesome guests. Our first guest was the amazingly fantastic Donna Sakar, talking about neurodiversity, and for some of this stuff you have to see it to get the full impact of it. So please reach out to us. You can follow the podcast itself on at TWDTA podcast, and there will be a website launching at twdta.com. But the thing about all of this is the community has a bigger voice and a bigger reach than many of us realise. We're a global community. People sit up and pay attention to us. And so it is time for us to use that collective voice. It's time for us to start to have the conversations about all of the things that we don't talk about. So what's in the talk for you today? So coming up, what are we not talking about? Let's talk about issues. How do you go about starting a conversation? And that one's actually a really important one. And then where do we go next? So, great, we've had the talk, we've thought about it. What happens next? What I will say is buckle your seatbelts, because this is going to be whistle stop, because I want to cover so much here. And I want to give you a taster of everything. I will say, listen to the podcast, because you will get more information. Go to the website, you will find blog posts. Go to my personal website, because you'll find personal blog posts from me about these subjects as well. So, what are we not talking about? What are the things that we're not talking about? Mental health, gender inequality, racial inequality, accessibility, addiction, LGBTQ plus rights, health and fitness, religion, and so many more. And we all know that these issues exist, or certainly some of these may have come as a surprise to you. But why are we not talking about them? What's the problem? Well, one of the problem is there's too much noise. It's one of those things that people are almost too frightened to start because of the magnitude of the task that lies ahead. It's seeing Everest in front of you and thinking there's no way I can ever climb that, and not even taking the first step. If somebody focuses on gender inequality, you'll get other people turn around going, yes, but what about racial inequality? If somebody talks about mental health, somebody will turn around and go, yeah, well, what about accessibility? And you're never going to please everybody, and you're never going to get everything 100% sorted. No organisation does. There's no organisation out there that will meet every single one of these things head on. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't make a start. We're seeing it with some of the equal rights movements. They've been going for decades and decades, and they're only now starting to really see some major traction. It's going to be a journey, but a journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. So try and shut out the noise that's there. Don't worry about the naysayers, and there will be naysayers. But just instead focus on, okay, we're making positive change. We're having positive conversations. We're looking at these things in a positive way, and in a way of, how can I help? How can I work on these? So, let's talk about issues. And here's a question for you to think about. That triangle, is that a pyramid going down, pointing down? Is it a spiral going down? Is it a spiral going up? And if you're a regular on Bespoke Badger, you may look at it and you may think, it reminds me of a corkscrew to open that bottle of wine that I want to drink. But language and perspective change our outlook on things. And it's no more visible in some ways than when we're talking about issues. Another question for you. Which one sounds more negative? Which one sounds worse? LGBT rights or LGBT issues? How about gender issues or gender equality? When I asked people, the word issues made the statement sound more negative. When people say that I have mental health issues, they aren't wrong. They aren't fully right either. By saying that I have mental health issues, it puts the weight on me. It puts the emphasis on me. It says it's my problem to sort out. And some of them are really, really difficult to get right, because let's think about mental health. Is there any positive language that exists around mental health? I have mental health issues. I struggle with mental health. I battle with mental health. I have mental health problems. And I'll be honest, I really struggled to find a way of framing that in a way that, yes, highlighted the fact that stuff's going on up here, but it's not just my problem to deal with. And the best I can come up with is that I manage my mental health on a daily basis. But if you ask me that tomorrow, I will forget that phraseology. And part of it is the fact that we've been raised, we've been brought up, media, schools, businesses, with that negative language, with that negative outlook. So it begs the question, why the negativity? Why the negative language? There's no reason for it other than the fact that people don't want to get involved, don't want to be part of the solution. But the thing is, the issue isn't with me. The issue isn't with me. Yes, I have mental health, battles, problems, struggles. See, there really is no positive way of framing that statement. And I'm not saying that mental health problems are positive, don't get me wrong, because they're not. But the language shapes it all. And we need to learn and find ways of changing the perspective, so instead of it becoming my issue to deal with and just my issue, it becomes something that people want to get alongside, people want to work with, people want to collaborate on to help make better environments. And the thing is, positivity works, because if you say that you're tackling gender issues, it makes it sound as though you're fighting. And yes, I know it's a fight, and I know it's been a struggle, and I know there are struggles there, and it is real. And I'm not undermining that or minimising that in any way. Please don't get me wrong on that. But if you say that you're working towards gender equality, sounds so much more positive. It's a message that sells so much better. And unfortunately, yes, we do have to sell these things. So let me take a quick look. Mental health. As I say, I struggle with my mental health. I have to manage it on a daily basis. There you go, I told you I'd forget the phrase. Last year was a really tough year. I had a breakdown in 2007. And since then, I have to manage my mental health daily. Some days are easier than others. Last year, with lockdown and everything else, I came really close to breaking down again. Thankfully, I was surrounded by people at home, but also in the community who got alongside me. I remember I got a message from one person, and I won't name him because I don't want to embarrass him or ruin his image. He made me cry because just at the right moment, without knowing it, he sent me a short message on WhatsApp. How are you? It was sent privately, and it just hit me at the right time. I needed somebody to ask how I was, so that I could say, you know what, I'm crap, I'm struggling, I can't cope. What was interesting was this week the BBC published an article on their news website that talked about how coronavirus has affected mental health. And you look at the graphs. In 2019, 10.9% of 16 to 39-year-olds identified as showing moderate or severe symptoms of depression. In 2020, that had gone up to 31%, a threefold increase. 40 to 69-year-olds, it had gone up 2.5%. 70 plus, it had doubled from 5% to 10.3%. It's an average of 16% of adults. I find it interesting that 40 to 69-year-olds have kind of coped better than some of the other age groups in some ways, in that they've had the smallest percentage increase, but it's depressing to see those depressing stats about depression. And then you look at the reasons. Feeling stressed or anxious, worried about the future, feeling bored, feeling lonely, too much time alone, relationship strain, feeling like a burden, no one to talk to. People with no or mild depression symptoms, over half of them still felt stressed or anxious. 85% of those with moderate or severe symptoms were feeling stressed or anxious, and are. Those statistics were from June last year. We've had another 7 months, nearly 8 months since then. What would those stats look like now? I dread to think, honestly, I do dread to think. And that's just mental health. Let's talk about racial inequality. Like any of the civilized world, civilized people, I was horrified. I was in tears. I was outraged at the killing of George Floyd. And for days I sat there and I didn't post anything on Twitter because I thought, do I have the right to post Black Lives Matter? Do I have the right to comment? And then somebody said on a news article on the TV that racial inequality isn't black people's problem. It's a white person's problem. It shouldn't be up to them to resolve. It should be up to people like me to resolve. And I thought, you know what? You're not wrong. I'm ashamed because you're so right. I've stayed silent all these years thinking, I don't want to get involved. I don't know if I've got the right to get involved. And all the while, I should have been actually standing up and going, we need to be making change. This is not right, the way that we're biased, the way that we're looking at things. And so I tweeted, and I still have hashtag BLM on my Twitter profile. It's not right. I'm proud to be playing a part in the Power Platform School, a marvellous initiative to see young black lives transformed and engaged within the tech world, because there is a massive imbalance. But we don't talk about it in work. We don't talk about it. And let me come on to one more. I'm going to highlight one more issue. Accessibility. There's a whole track here at Scottish Summit running on the subject of accessibility. And I got asked, when was the last time you were asked to make a project accessible? It caused me to pause. It made me think, because I suddenly realised I've never ever been asked. I've sat in workshops with people who are using colour filters on their screens, or they have their screen zoomed in so far they're using magnifier and things like that. I sat in one workshop where somebody had earphones in one ear because they were using a screen reader. Yet none of them asked to make the projects I was working on accessible. And the thing is that accessibility isn't about disability. It's about capability, not disability. It's about making things accessible. It doesn't mean you're disabled just because you need to use a screen reader. It doesn't mean that you're disabled just because you need to use a colour filter. It doesn't mean that you're disabled because you need to zoom in. It just means that we need to make the platforms more capable. And it upsets me when I think about things like that. Yes, because how many people feel excluded from working in the tech world? How many people feel as though they can't get involved, they can't be productive in the tech world because they can't use the technology because it's not accessible? I've broken the guidelines, well, not the guidelines, that's wrong, sorry. I've broken the template that we're using in Scottish Summit, because you'll see that wherever I use the pink text, I've outlined it in white. Because somebody pointed out to me that actually that pink on the grey is not accessible. And I thought, but we've worked hard to try and make sure that we are accessible at Scottish Summit. And as I said earlier, we're not going to get things 100% right. But we can take steps. We can make sure there's accessibility checkers in Microsoft Office. I've run the accessibility checker on these slides to try and make sure that my text is in order and that key images have alt text on them so that screen readers can read them. But we've got so much further to go. And the thing is, people think that accessibility, it's too expensive, it takes too long, and it's not sexy. Nobody's going to shout about accessibility being, woo, the latest and greatest, sexiest thing. But hold on, why not? Why not? If you've not seen it, go and have a look at the TV adverts for the Xbox adaptive controller, where you see a bunch of kids who the standard Xbox controller is inaccessible for them. And so there's an adaptive controller that has bigger buttons that works. You watch the joy on their faces and you listen to them talking. You see them playing with their regular friends. And you tell me that accessibility isn't something to get excited about. You tell me that accessibility isn't something to shout about. Go on. I almost dare you to do that, because if you watch that video and if you have a heart, there is no way you can turn around and say that. And it doesn't take long. Do you know how long it took me to make my slides accessible for this session? 5 minutes. 5 minutes. And I did it while I was reading through my slides, checking them. So it didn't particularly cost me any more time because I was paying attention. Anyway, breathe, Mike. Take a deep breath. Calm. Because let's think about starting conversations. How do we have the conversations with people? How do we go to our employers, to our managers and say, we've got a serious gender imbalance at work. I feel that as a company, we're not supporting people with mental health struggles. We should be building accessibility into our core product right at the beginning. All of our projects should say we will make our product accessible. How do we go about having that conversation? In the words of Bob Hoskins in the BT adverts from way too long ago, so some of you will not even know what the heck I'm talking about, it's good to talk. But how do we talk? How do we have those conversations? The first one is ask questions. Excuse me, boss, can I just have a word with you? I've been thinking a lot about accessibility and about the work we do in the Power Platform. Can I just ask, would it be possible for us to look at ways of updating our standards to ensure that accessibility is part of it. Just small changes. It's not going to cost us any extra money. It just means we've just got to think a bit more and just make a conscious effort. Ask questions. Hi, HR. Can I just ask, what's in place to support people who are struggling with mental health? Is there any more we can do? Just little questions. But the key is, and this actually is really, really key, don't be confrontational. Don't go in going, we're crap. We don't support people with mental health. Why not? Oh, our products are useless. We're so discriminatory. Why don't we support people with accessibility? Or, oh, we're such a white company. We have no black people or Asian people in this company. It's dreadful. Goes back to the point I made earlier about negative language. If we go in negative, people are going to get their defences up. People are going to put walls up. And you find that when people do that, they're not going to be receptive to your message. They're not going to listen. They're not going to pay attention. And they're not going to want to help you. And that defeats the object. I hate the phrase radical feminism because, again, it's been turned by the media into such a negative thing. Radical Christians, radical Muslims, radical. I mean, yeah, again, showing my age, but I remember when rad used to be cool. Rad meaning radical. It was the thing to be. Nowadays, if you're radical, it's a negative thing. And they've turned it. When you think radical Muslims, they've turned that to mean that they're terrorists. Or that they're misogynists. They're oppressors of females and why? They've turned radical Christian into meaning the kind of people that are totally against everything. Everything's a sin. But this may come as a surprise to many of you. I would think of myself as a radical Christian. Not because I think those things, but because I'm passionate about being a Christian. I'm passionate about my faith. But I can't use the word radical because it's so negative now. And I hate the fact that that's become the case because I'm almost calling for us to be radical about these issues. But we can't be because radicalism normally means confrontation and we can't be confrontational. So let me change that then. Let's not be radical. Let's be passionate. Let's be really passionate about these things. Let's stand our ground. Let's have conversations. Let's ask questions without confrontation. And the third thing, with having those conversations is accept small beginnings. You're not going to get it 100% right. You're not going to be able to become fully gender balanced, fully racially balanced, fully accessible, fully observant of people with religious beliefs. You're not going to be fully capable of being completely fit and healthy. You're not going to be fully able to handle issues with addiction and everything else in one day. This is a journey. This is the beginning. For me, it's a beginning. And I appreciate that for many people this is stuff they've been fighting for decades. And I'm sorry that I'm late to the party. Party's the wrong word. I'm sorry I'm late to the cause. I was going to say fight, going to say battle, but it's negative, it's confrontational. See what I mean about language? It's so easy. We're predispositioned, we're pre-programmed to use negative language when it comes to this stuff, and it shouldn't be the case. It really should not be the case. I'm sorry for what I've perpetuated in my career. Subconsciously, none of it deliberate, trust me. None of it deliberate, none of it with any malicious thought or intent. But through inaction, through not taking a stand, through not asking questions, I've perpetuated this stuff. A friend of mine, I sat in a pub, if we can remember what those are, November 2019. There you go. I sat with a couple of friends having a beer. I'd just given a talk that hadn't gone particularly well, but it'd gone okay. I sat with my friends, and one of them, they turned round to me, and they use accessibility tools. And they said that even something as small and simple as using camel case or Pascal case on hashtags where you capitalise each word in the hashtag completely changes the way they can use things like Twitter and LinkedIn. Because their screen readers, when hashtags are all lowercase, can't read them. But when you put capitals in, screen readers can make sense of them. And I thought, but Twitter have always advertised hashtags as lowercase. And I've bought into that. I do it all lowercase. Since that day, I've made that small change to make sure that all my hashtags have capitals in them. Small beginnings can lead to big change. So where next? Education and awareness. Educate yourself. Look into these topics. Pick one. Pick one. Accessibility. Microsoft Learn has an accessibility track you can follow. It's a quick course, but it'll open your eyes. Why not just run through it? Why not just quickly go through it and take a look? And then, once you've educated yourself a bit, why not start to have those conversations? Because talk is actually good, especially when it leads to action. But if we don't have conversations, if we don't talk about these things, nothing will change. The reason they haven't changed is because people haven't been talking about them loudly. And also because people haven't been listening, because not enough people have been talking about them loudly. And again, I acknowledge the battles that have been fought for decades. But I also acknowledge that I have not raised my voice in support at work or in other environments. The more of us that talk, the more of us that educate ourselves and become aware, the more of us will have a voice. The volume will rise up to a point that people will have to listen, that change will have to happen. And then accept that perfection is unattainable. You're not going to make it perfect. Again, another friend who uses a colour filter sometimes on their screens. They commented that they get frustrated when people use the default blue for hyperlinks because a lot of dyslexics can use blue filters, and of course blue on blue you can't see the links. I took a look at their website, which admittedly they'd only just set up, and I laughed, and they laughed as well because they'd left it as the default blue because they'd focused on all the other areas. Perfection is unattainable, but change is achievable. We can make small changes that can make big differences. And when we find these little things, when we find these small changes, I mean, seriously, what does it take to change the colour of a hyperlink? Updating a CSS style on a web page. It's not difficult. It doesn't cost anything. So, let's accept perfection's unattainable, but we need to be making small changes. So, okay. That's me done. That's me over. I'm off my soapbox now. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in and for catching the things we don't talk about at Scottish Summit. I hope that you'll go and listen to the podcast. I would love to talk to you more. There's more in the pipeline for some of this stuff, because as you can tell, I'm quite passionate about it. I'm fired up, and I'm going to be working with other people to try and create other stuff. So keep your eyes peeled. TWDTA podcast on Twitter, twdta.com. Please find us all, and I look forward to tuning in. And again, thank you to all our sponsors, to ScriptRunner, DQ Global, Proximo 3, Red Spire, Agilysys and Hitachi Solutions. Thank you so much. And folks, thank you again for tuning in, and thank you to the organisers of this event. Thank you so much for all your hard work. Enjoy the rest of the day. Enjoy the rest of the sessions. Enjoy tuning in future weeks to come, because there's going to be hundreds of videos out there to watch. Enjoy it all, and thank you. So long, folks. Goodbye.